Hello, this is Mansi from Mansi Makes, and this is episode 2 of the Artist's Way series where I share my journal pages based on the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. This is part 2 of the core values page. I had done an online assessment and written down all the words that spoke to me, and then whittled them down to 5 words that are my core values, my guiding principles in life. And the 5 words that came up, that surfaced in this journey, in this process, were empathy, credibility, making a difference, intuition, and simplicity. And I turned around again at my shelves of color, and the orange and the pink jumped out at me, as did a cream. And I just got those out and just started spreading color as usual without a plan on my journal page. And I realized in this particular process that if a color I'm trying to get on the page is not squeezing out of the bottle, I'm not going to force it. It means it just doesn't want to be there in that moment. And some of you might find that funny, but that's how my process works, is by being in the moment. And if it's working, it's working. If it's not working, move on to the next thing that's working, because I really strongly feel that if it wants to be on the page, it will find a way to be on the page. And if it doesn't want to be on the page, I'm not going to force it. The same thing happened with the silver. This is a paint, a marabou paint that has been sitting on my shelf for many years without being used. And I just took it out and it just added this beautiful sheen to the page, and it'll end up getting covered up and you'll barely even see it. But when you tilt the page, it's there. So that's what I mean by using what your eye first lands on and really letting intuition guide your hands, not really thinking about what you're doing. Same thing with the stencils. Just pick up whatever and see how those patterns emerge on the page, what plays against what. And that's exactly what I did here. Now, all my core values at this time are completely covered up, and I just picked up this is another example of picking up a cool shade against the warm shades that were speaking to me, the orange and the pink. And then I just added that blue and a little bit of that green that I had done on the previous page. And here I'm thinking that there is some continuity between the two pages, because the first page is where I said the core values, and this second spread is where I list those core values out. So I think subconsciously what I was trying to do was introduce that continuity from the previous spread to the spread by using that dark green. And then I turned around and looked at the light green, the folk art color shift paint that I love but never use. The lime green is not something I reach out for. And I just figured, I'm just going to see what happens if I use it. And I noticed that I am relying on the same acrylics. I'm reaching for the same shelf on the right side of my craft desk. So this time I turned to my left, and the first thing I saw were distress crayons. So I picked some of those up. And again, it's a fun way of using things in your stash that you might not be paying attention to, getting out of your comfort zone, grabbing stuff that is there that you bought for a reason. Whether that reason is valid or not, we're not going to get into that, but you have those things, right? And sometimes you're not using them. So just turn around and pick random things up. Doesn't matter if the colors are going to be harmonious. Doesn't matter if the media will work with each other or not. Just try it out and see what happens. Next, I picked up this purple. This is an acrylic ink, and it just kind of threw up on the page, really. It didn't work with my stencil. It was just kind of like blah on the page, and I didn't know. I was struggling at this point with this page. There was so much going on because I hadn't really imposed any limits on myself. I was just picking up stencils and colors and just kind of going for it, and I think that's the mood I was in. I think it was that feeling, that sense of being overwhelmed by the number of choices you have. Because in this exercise, the assessment that I did, I had 2 pages worth of words written down that I really strongly felt made sense to me. And then to bring them down to 5, it was overwhelming. It was a bit much for me. And I think that's kind of where that creative expression found its way on this page, with so much happening in terms of the colors, in terms of the stenciling, in terms of the texture. It's just a lot going on. So I figured, you know what, I'm just going to write those words down again. And somehow the sharing and the service cropped up. And I think it's the making a difference bit that those two were aligned with. Those were not words on my list, but they definitely go with the making a difference bit that I identify very strongly with. And then it became too much to take in. So I just put white over that and just used my Jelly Arts comb again, put a paper napkin over it. It was almost like a ritualistic ceremony of, okay, I see you, I acknowledge you, you're all out there, but I need to focus, to hone in on what means the most to me, what's most valid, what's most current, what's most, at the heart of what I do and who I am. What is it? It's not things in passing. It's things that I firmly believe in. And that's when I started looking for motifs to kind of represent that. And I have an entire drawer of these die cuts or hand cut stencils that I just save. When I'm doing that exercise, I don't really know if they'll ever end up being used. I don't know if I'm going to put them in a card or a journal page, but that's kind of where I went. I opened the drawer and I started taking out all of these different shapes and seeing what speaks to me on the page, what feels right. And I don't, again, have a way of explaining to you what feels right. When you do this exercise, you will know when something feels right. You just have to go through that work, that process to know what feels right to you. And it make no sense to anybody else. Like, for example, I have a leaf over there and I'm making this kind of nest with black and I'm putting a butterfly on it. It may make no sense to you, but to me it did. It was this dark place, this dark cloud, and out of which this butterfly was emerging. It was a metamorphosis. That's what I was seeing in that. Same thing for that heart. When I put that heart, little heart, the orange heart on the top over there, for me, that was, that's where I create from. I create from my heart. I lean into my intuition. So it was important for me to have that heart there. The leaves, I'm not really sure why I picked them, given that they don't really lend themselves to the notion of credibility or making a difference or simplicity or empathy, but they spoke to me, and that's why they're there on that page. So are those abstract shapes, the circle and those wonky rectangles. But again, it wasn't me trying to force meaning out of them. It was me placing motifs and shapes on the journal spread that seemed right, that felt right. And again, these little squares that you see me pasting here are something I just sometimes will take my brayer sheets from when I'm doing gel plate printing. I roll off the excess paint from my brayer onto this copy paper. I save that copy paper, and some days I will just, when I want to do something completely mindless, I will take a hole puncher and just punch out shapes. It can be rectangles, it can be circles, it can be squares, and I just save those little boxes. And they're all different colors and they're all fun and they all have different stories to tell, especially when they're taken out of the context in which they were created. So I added those on. And, you could do a lot of, again, psychoanalysis on why I chose the motifs I did in that moment. But I can tell you that all I was doing was trying to make sense of it all through my art, through my expression. The idea that we can whittle down all of our lives, work, and somehow find meaning in what we do through 5 core values is a lot to ask for. And I actually did spend a significant amount of time after I had whittled down those 5 core values while making this page and after finishing this journal spread, just thinking about it, because it's not easy. It's not easy to say, yes, empathy is the one thing that stands out for me. Empathy for whom? Is it empathy for others? Is it empathy for myself? And I realized during the creation of this journal that I actually do not give myself the same amount of empathy I very freely offer others. Why don't I do that? Credibility is important to me, and that is something that's just ingrained in my nature. I need to be known as somebody with credibility and with integrity, and I do my work with a lot of honesty. And that's important to me. It guides who I am and what I do. And I really, really want to make a difference through the work that I do by reaching out to you, by opening up your heart to receive the joy that you deserve. And I want to be able to share that. I want to be able to help people feel that. And I've always leaned into my intuition, so having that there was natural. And then simplicity is something I'm striving for. Life feels too complicated some days, and that's one of the core values I want driving me forward. So it was a very deep exercise in finding those 5 words and then putting them down on paper in this creative expression. And you can see how it kind of started out really busy, really overwhelming, lots of patterns, lots of color. But then I went back to the first colors that I saw, the pink, the orange, and the white or the cream. And I, for fun, added that lime green because of that simplicity that I just told you, because I want simplicity to be a driving force in my life. And the green was kind of a last minute thing, right? For me, I wasn't going for that lime green, and I introduced that as a way of introducing some newness, some freshness into the core values that guided me. And that's how this page honestly came about. And again, I reached for that same stamp set from Berhit Copson that fills in all those spaces and just makes the whole spread come full circle almost. It completes the page, I think, with those marks. So again, there's no one way of doing this. There's no right way of doing this. There's my way of doing it, and there's your way of doing it. And they might be very different. Our processes will be very different. I can guarantee you that. Even if we were sitting down face to face in a workshop and doing this together, we would have very different pages. And that's because each one of us is unique, and the marks we make, the marks we leave behind are all different. So there's one thing that I would like to share in terms of this page is there was a lot of letting go that happened. There was a lot of changing of mind that happened. There was a lot of, this doesn't look right, but this does. And so reworking some elements a lot felt right. I usually don't. I usually just kind of do it and let it be. But for this particular page, I felt the need to keep going back and revising how my leaves looked, what parts of the leaves I wanted to accentuate, where I wanted to add glitter, where I wanted more texture, what did I want my eye to rest on, and holistically, what made sense, because the page as a whole had to make sense too, not just the individual elements in it. So that's kind of where I landed with it, with the colors. And ultimately, even if they're not harmonious per the color wheel, it looks harmonious because it's you on a page, and you are complex and you have a lot of layers, and not all of them jive with each other, but that's what makes you so unique, and that's what makes this page works too. So again, I hope you enjoy seeing the process and how I keep revisiting some areas, and it's okay. It's okay to keep coloring over things. It's okay to change your mind halfway. It's okay to just paint it all white and start all over again. All of that is okay. You do you. It's your journal. It's your time to play. It's your time to explore. It's your time to be creative. So have fun and create with your heart, because your hands will always, always follow.